This podcast is for general information only. It is not intended as a substitute for general healthcare services. If you have medical conditions, you need to see your doctor. Use of this information is at the user's own risk. Welcome to FitRx with Dr. Greg Dennis. Join me as we challenge the standard sick model of healthcare. This is your source for everything health, wellness, prevention, fitness, biohacking, and more. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of FitRx. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Dennis. Really excited to have this conversation today with another physician, Dr. Lauren Fitzgerald. I think she's otherwise known as Dr. Fitz.
Correct.
And she is an anesthesiologist who has kind of transitioned out of, quote, conventional care, which we'll talk about, is now into, a lot of the stuff I am, kind of functional medicine, anti-aging medicine. She is the medical director at the Larimar Med clinic in near Chicago, where they do hormones, functional medicine, aesthetics, just all kind of fun stuff. And I think she's maybe even into some biohacking, and we can talk about that. She also has her own podcast called The Made Fitz Show, Fitz. She has a huge presence on social media. I've been following her for a while, has a ton of followers. And so I'm just excited to have her on today. I was actually just recently on her show. And so we're doing a little podcast switch here. So Dr. Fitz, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's long overdue, but I'm happy to be here.
For sure.
I'm excited what we're going to talk about, though, for sure.
Yeah. And for those listening, I want to kind of get her story, but we are going to talk about some weight loss and some Ozempic, or, the generic Semaglutide, which I'm sure you've heard about because it's kind of all over. And she has this kind of a special interest in that, a lot of experience in that. And so we're going to dive into that a little deeper here shortly. But first, I'm always interested, especially when I talk to another physician, to hear their story about how they made the transition from conventional medicine into what you do now. And so just talk about that a little bit, if you will.
Well, it was when I lived in Oklahoma City. I was at Southwest Integris, and I was in the OR with an older surgeon, an older OR tech, an older OR nurse, and all of them were very unhappy, miserable people. And I had this moment where I was just like, man, and I'm naturally a happy person. So I don't, if I would have stayed doing anesthesia for 4 or 5 decades, I don't think I would have ended up that way. But it was that moment of like, man, a lot of the people that have spent decades in the OR are really unhappy people. Is this really going to make me happy the rest of my life? And that's when I started to think, like, what really does make me happy? And I've always been into health and fitness. I started teaching aerobics when I was 16. I used to be a dancer, so it's kind of a perfect, correlation with, my years of dance and my love of health and fitness. And I was always that person that in med school and residency, I was the one that, was packing my lunch and would still exercise despite working 80+ hour weeks. And I've always just really been passionate about that. And when I had the realization, like, okay, I'm not doing what I'm passionate about, and this whole thing that I signed up for isn't really what I thought it would be, because the fact is that, and I know your audience knows this, the healthcare system is not a healthcare system, it's a sick care system. And I, just as an anesthesiologist, I got to see just the plethora of what end of life can look like when you don't take care of this one body that you're given. And I was just like, man, if I could get a hold of these people years before, they wouldn't even need to be in the operating room. And so I did a bold move, and I left a very lucrative practice. I mean, anyone that knows an anesthesiologist knows they make a lot of money, but money doesn't buy happiness. And at the end of the day, I really was just following what I believe was my God-given purpose. And so I left the practice of medicine for a few years before, and I was just doing like health coaching and that kind of stuff. And then when I realized I didn't have to do another 4-year residency to get trained in functional medicine, it was kind of a perfect fit. I'd kept my medical license up and all that kind of stuff, but that was when I was like, all right, this kind of aligns with what I believe in, because I had my own experience with functional medicine. I was having issues that really no primary care doctor really helped me out on. They said that I was healthy and my labs looked normal and kind of tossed me out. And then it's when I went to a functional medicine provider, and that was the first introduction to what functional medicine was, and realized like this is in alignment with my purpose. And here I am. I don't know how many years later, and we opened Larimar Med in the end of 2020. A rough time to build a business, but we're thriving and talking about opening a second location. So wow. Here we are. Yeah.
Very nice. We'll talk a little bit about Larimar Med. I mean, what all do y'all do there?
So I had this vision of offering everything that I believed in, and I'm definitely a biohacker. I mean, I was doing the blue blocking glasses, the red light therapy before it was the thing. And I just remember sitting at a stoplight and thinking, man, if I could have a place where I just had everything that I use, like red light therapy, IV lounge, cryotherapy, infrared sauna, high quality supplements, the functional medicine type thing, massage, facials, that would be perfect. And I had the opportunity to buy an already existing business here. So I'm actually in the suburbs of Chicago. It's called St. Charles, but this business was just a day spa. They just had facials and massages, and they were looking to sell a business. So I basically bought, their clientele and turned it into the med spa functional medicine place that it is. And so it's a 3-story building. I mean, we offer, something for everyone. I've added on medical weight loss and bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And those are 2 of my favorite things that we offer here. But really we offer everything that I love. And I will say, of course, we're a med spa, so we do offer the Botox and the filler and that kind of stuff. And I realize it's not natural, but I'm 44 years old and I've been getting Botox to my forehead since I was 38. So it's one of those things. So we do offer that, which is not as natural.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. So you really just described like my dream practice, because I've really thought the same thing. And I just kind of started over. A lot of my listeners know that. So my new practice isn't even 3 months old yet. But anyway, something like that, to be able to have everything I like, a sauna, which I have one at the house, but I mean, I'd love to have that at a clinic where patients can enjoy the benefits of that, red light therapy, a cold thermogenesis, all this stuff. And I'm a man, so I'm probably not as big on the aesthetics and stuff, but all those other things, gosh, I'd love to have all that. So yeah, you just kind of described my dream practice. So that's cool. You're able to do that.
Yeah. And 4 years from now, you're going to be interviewing someone and telling about your success over the last 4 years. It happens very quickly, but I think being clear about the vision that you have and what you want, and then being bendable to maybe that doesn't really fit. Like, for example, cryotherapy, I love cryotherapy, but it really didn't fit and it wasn't making us money. And so I had to make a business decision that we sold that machine, and I still love cryotherapy, but I no longer offer it. So
yeah, makes sense. Well, very cool. Well, so you mentioned a little bit of weight loss, and so let's talk about that, because that's everybody. Gosh, it seems like everybody nowadays is at least asking about this new weight loss drug that's out there. There's a lot of the branded names, Ozempic and Wegovy and all these. Semaglutide's the generic for this. A lot of people have lost a lot of weight on it, and I was telling you before the recording that I've kind of been slow at jumping on the bandwagon. For reasons that we'll talk about as far as muscle loss and stuff. But talk about that, if you will, and because it sounds like you do a lot of that, and just maybe things that we need to that patients need to look for if they're interested in this, and how to do it right, because there's a lot of clinics out there that are just going to give you the medicine and not follow up and not follow the things that they're supposed to be following. And so talk about it, and maybe how the drug works, and just specifically how y'all do it there at your clinic.
Okay, so I love to talk about this topic, and so if I'm talking too much, you just have to tell me, because
you're good.
I have so much experience with this and so much opinion about it. So let me first rewind the clock about 2.5 years ago, early 2022. I was actually on a a trip with one of my best girlfriends. She's actually a Oklahoma native, Dr. Rachel McKenzie. Shout out to her. She and I were two of the only female anesthesiologists in our group at one time. She was the one who told me to open my mind to even considering this class of drugs. Okay. Because I, like so many that still have this opinion coming from the fitness industry, I thought that it was just a cheat. And I'm not about cheating, right? I'm like, this is just for lazy people that don't want to exercise and don't want to eat healthy and just want a quick fix. And that was it. I didn't even look into this whole class of peptides until she had the talk. And she's like, Lauren, I really think you need to look into these GLP-1 agonists, because think about how many people of your patients are insulin resistant on their way to being pre-diabetic. Like, those are the people that this class of peptides will really help. And you and I both know, I think the latest stats is like 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So somewhere on that spectrum of insulin resistance to pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes. And you and I both pretty much call Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes, right? It's on that spectrum of metabolic syndromes, right? So if it weren't for her, I would have been late to the game too. And I wouldn't have considered it, because I respect her. She's a physician, but she also owns a med spa as well. And she knows how I am. And so that's when I started looking into it. And so I had 5 women that I had been working with. They were my clients when I was health coaching. They became some of my first functional medicine patients. These were women that I knew well, and they just could not lose that extra weight. They had hit this plateau, and I knew that they weren't lying to me. I knew that they weren't lazy. I knew they weren't eating crap and all of the things. And yet all of my tricks were not working. And so I literally asked them, can I experiment and prescribe this drug with you? And they all, because they trust me, they're absolutely. And all 5 of them started to move the needle with the weight loss. And I was like, okay, well, so that's when I started prescribing it for a handful of my other patients that were already kind of in the same boat. That's when I started seeing, literally, it was almost 100% of my patients were actually having success with it. And that's when I decided to use it myself. So fast forward about 7 months after I'd been prescribing it for probably about 30 or 40 patients by that point, and had seen success in everyone, I was struggling with my own extra about 20 to 25 pounds. I was 42 at the time. I'm pretty sure that perimenopause started at 40. And that was when I opened the business. So I kind of chalked all of the extra weight gain and, basically stress. And I went through a breakup, and it was a lot on my plate. So, okay, the little weight creeped up, and here I am, despite doing all of the things, I was carrying an additional about 20, 25 pounds. So I decided to use it myself. By that point, I had realized that if you don't do it the right way, you will lose muscle. And I've lifted weights my whole adult life. I've worked way too hard for these muscles. I'm not about to lose it. And so that was really when I started implementing the 5 non-negotiables. And the 5 non-negotiables are what I do with all of my weight loss patients. And now it's been 2.5 years since I've been prescribing semaglutide and or tirzepatide to my patients. And literally, like, I will fire patients if they don't do my non-negotiables. I'll just say that. I've treated well over 1,000 patients, and I understand why so many people have the bad outcomes, because they are being prescribed it by providers that don't really care, that are just in it for the money. Mm-hmm. I'm here. Making money is not bad, but I am here to help my patients get better. I always let them know at the very first appointment, you have 5 non-negotiables. I'm going to meet with you every single month. If you don't do those 5 non-negotiables, I will fire you. I give them 1 grace period. Sometimes life throws you a curveball. I mean, I've had a couple patients like out of the blue lose a parent or have a bad car wreck. Obviously, I'm going to give those people grace. But someone that's just lazy and not doing their non-negotiables, I'm not going to continue taking care of them, because I let them know, I want your success to mirror me. And if you don't do it right, it's going to make me look bad. So I'm going to basically fire you. So the non-negotiables are super important, and they sound like this. So the first one is, and 2 of them have to do with muscle mass. So I start everyone off at lifting heavy. Not, if you lift weights in Pilates, that doesn't mean lifting heavy. I'm not going to discredit your resistance training in your Pilates class, but I need you to actually lift weights at least 3 times a week. Okay. The second one is eat your goal weight in protein. And this is the one that people always struggle with. So if they're female, so I'll use me as an example. I'm 5'6". So my ideal body weight as a female that's 5'6" is somewhere between about 130 to 140 pounds, right? So I try to at least hit 130 grams of protein every single day. I typically get a little bit more than that, somewhere between 150 to 160, because I lift pretty heavy and I lift a little bit more than 3 days a week. But those two are the most important as far as maintaining your muscle mass. If you are eating your protein and you are lifting weights, it's next to impossible to lose muscle with these peptides, okay? But I will tell you that patients struggle with hitting the protein because the appetite suppression is very real. So this is where I let them know you have to schedule out your meals. You can't wait till noon to eat. I'm sorry for those people that are, intermittent fasters. You can intermittent fast. You just have to move your eating window a little bit earlier. So I let them know, ideally, it takes about 4 to 5 hours for your stomach to move the food along to the rest of the GI tract. So I tell patients, schedule your meals about 5 hours apart. So I do reverse engineer. If you go to bed at 9, you should be done eating by 6, right? Because you need that 3-hour window for your body to properly digest the food so you don't get heartburn when you lay down, right? So if you're gonna be done eating by 6, you need to have dinner at 5:30, subtract 5 hours before that. So eat lunch at about 12:30, subtract 5 hours from that, eat breakfast at about 7 or 7:30. That way you have about 5 hours, but you can't skip meals, and aim to eat. Basically, if you have 120 grams of protein you need to eat in a day, divided by 3, that means you're eating 40 grams each meal. If you're doing, 200 grams, you're eating a little bit more than that, or you're sneaking in a fourth snack that's just all protein. But protein is a must. And this is the hardest part for my weight loss patients that I've seen over the last 2.5 years.
Yeah.
The third non-negotiable is what I'm doing right now. I'm walking. I'm getting my NEAT in, non-exercise activity. Now, this is where I've actually started making my patients open their phone and tell me what their average step count was over the last week and over the last month, because I want to make sure that they're hitting a minimum of a set amount of steps. I start everyone off at 10,000, but if someone's been following me online and they know that I'm going to do steps and they've been building up and maybe their average is 12, then I'll just bump it up to 13. But my goal is to get everyone to 15,000 steps a day. So ultimately, it takes some people longer than others. I mean, if you're carrying an extra 150 pounds of weight, it's a little bit more rigorous to get that 10,000, and building up to 15,000 steps a day going to be a little bit of slower process. But I was listening to some podcast that was interviewing this PhD that talked about how it was postulated that our ancestors walked between 15,000 to 20,000 steps a day. And for me, in my own weight loss, which I ended up losing 25 pounds, and it was about 1 pound of weight per week, but with semaglutide, I never needed to go past 0.5 milligrams. So I stayed at a low dose the whole time. But this was what was different for me. I hadn't ever counted my steps. I always considered myself active, which I've always worked out and lifted, but I had never been intentional about the NEAT. And during this weight loss journey for me, my average that year was 15,000. I've since my average is a little bit higher than that now. But like we were saying before we started recording, my rule is if I'm on my computer, I'm on my walking pad, and I'm going like 1.3 miles an hour, but I'm consistently moving and getting my steps in. So those are 3. And the fourth non-negotiable has to do with hydration. So proactive hydration. I call it proactive hydration because semaglutide and tirzepatide not only suppress your appetite, but they suppress your thirst. So a lot of people kind of stop eating because they forget about it, because the food noise goes away, right? So if they don't have a scheduled meal time, they're going to skip meals. And then the appetite suppression, the thirst suppression, they forget to drink. They get hypovolemic, and that causes nausea. So the 2 most common reasons that people get nauseated is because they're not eating and they're not drinking. So you have to force them to eat their protein, and you have to force them to stay on top of their hydration. Then the 5th non-negotiable is just data. You can't change what you don't measure. And I know a lot of people that number on the scale is it's emotional, but it's just one of the many data points that I like to use for the measurements. I ask them to weigh themselves weekly. I ask them to do measurements monthly. I ask them to count their step count daily. And then I asked them to do a DEXA scan if they have the availability. We're actually just getting our DEXA scan here at Larimar Med tomorrow because we were referring so many out, and I'm like, we just need to have one here for patients. But the DEXA scan is the most accurate way to determine percent body fat, percent muscle mass, visceral fat, and bone mineral density. So ultimately, my weight loss journey, which happened over 32 weeks, I lost 0 muscle per DEXA scan, actually gained some muscle, which was kind of cool. So it can be done, but this is the problem, is that most providers don't care like you and I do. So they're just prescribing it and then letting the patient go off. And of course, they're losing a lot of weight, but they're also losing a lot of muscle.
So it's funny, as you were talking, everything you just described there, whether you're on semaglutide or not, really, you just defined the key points for longevity.
Thank you.
I think we both have studied, some form of anti-aging medicine, and I've given even a lecture before, and I've talked about, the foundation of longevity is movement, which you described.
Yep.
Lifting something heavy.
Yep.
Water intake and protein. I just say prioritize protein, which, as you mentioned, is difficult for a lot of people. Seems to be more difficult for women. I don't know why that is, but so yeah, I mean, all of those points are just really what we should be doing anyways.
Well, and I let them know. So at that first appointment, when I meet with them, I let them know, look, my goal is to help you lose the weight using this tool with all of the other tools. But these other tools, these non-negotiables are not going to be the things that you do while you're on semaglutide. They're going to be the things that you do forever. Yeah. And truly, you're just creating new habits. I also like to establish the realistic goals and expectations. If you lose 1 to 2 pounds of weight per week, that's realistically the goal. And I oftentimes like to emphasize, I actually want it closer to the 1 pound of weight per week instead of the 2 pounds, because especially when white women lose weight really fast, it's not cute. We're the ones that get the really bad Ozempic face and Ozempic butt, because if you lose weight fast, our tissues are not bouncing back the way our more melanated sisters are. So I like to, if you have 25 pounds to lose, I like to establish that the first month you may or may not lose any weight on the scale, because a lot of people don't start to see changes on the scale at that first initial starting dose. But I've never had a patient not see results come month 2. But if you have 25 pounds of weight to lose, you need to estimate in your head, well, roughly that's going to be 25 to 29 weeks until I get to my goal. And then once we get to your goal, then we wean you down off of the dose. So I let them understand it's going to be a lot easier to wean you off of it if you have established these goals, these non-negotiables, and you haven't lost muscle. Because the more muscle you have, the faster your resting metabolic rate is. And that is the key factor to being able to successfully wean off of this. And I would say, if I had to guess, probably 80 to 85% of my patients can successfully wean off of it. And then the ones that can't typically have some sort of history of struggling with their weight their entire life, type 2 diabetes in their family, or just obesity in their family. So oftentimes, and I'll let them know, it doesn't mean that because when I weaned myself off of it, I was nervous because I've never, I got down to 16% body fat, and I hadn't been that way, literally since probably teenage years. So I was like, ooh, okay, I'm going to try and wean off of it. But I also gave myself permission that if weaning off of it, I started to see the weight come back, I was okay at getting back on a small dose and a maintenance dose, because I knew how much better I looked and felt in my own skin.
Very nice. The only thing that you did mention that I might add would maybe be hormone optimization. And I know you're big into that as well.
Totally.
Especially for women, and men too. I mean, if your testosterone in particular is really, really low, it's going to be difficult to maintain muscle and for sure build muscle. How do you incorporate that into your weight loss program, or do you?
No, I think that's such a great question. So after sending so many of my functional medicine patients to another provider for BHRT, I was like, screw this. I'm just going to go ahead and get trained myself. So in the last basically 8-9 months, I have been doing hours and hours and hours of training for BHRT. And so I've met a bunch of great providers that have been doing it way longer than me. And they've all said that if you have a person that's midlife and beyond that's struggling with their weight, if you can get their hormones optimized, they might not even need a GLP-1 agonist. So, of course, my patients are kind of in the opposite category. They're on GLP-1s and now we need to get their hormones optimized. But I've let them know that once we get your hormones optimized, it's going to be a lot easier to wean off of that GLP-1 agonist, specifically like thyroid and testosterone. If you can get those two hormones optimized, typically body composition, especially if you have a highly motivated patient that's lifting heavy, that's getting their steps in, that's eating whole, real food, prioritizing sleep, all of the things, it's going to be so much easier to get them off of the GLP-1 agonist because you've optimized their hormones. So I kind of did it in reverse, but I definitely have lots of patients that we are getting hormonally optimized now.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's talk about, so if a patient comes in and they ask, is it better to get on semaglutide, tirzepatide, and they're going to ask, because I'll hear patients say, well, I have a friend that is getting the branded Ozempic and their insurance is paying for it. I mean, will my insurance pay for it? Which I would say most of the time they do not. But I mean, how do you kind of go about answering all those questions?
Great question. So I let them know, say, hey, if your insurance will pay for it, cool. I'm not going to be prescribing because I don't deal with any health insurance. So if you can, one, if your health insurance does cover it, cool. But two, you got to make sure that you qualify for their qualifications to pay for it. More times than not, most people don't. Right. So if their health insurance actually does cover it, you have to be a BMI of 30 or above, or a BMI of 27 or above with like two cofactors like diabetes and hypertension, right? So a lot of people aren't meeting that criteria. If they do, cool. But the problem is their primary care doctor is not giving them any guidance. They're just prescribing it as you take this dose this month, this dose, and it's increasing no matter what's going on with the patient. That's when bad stuff is happening. So knock on wood, I've had zero of these bad complications like pancreatitis, gallbladder, gastroparesis, stomach paralysis. And that's all happening with patients that are on the really high doses that, in my opinion, are being prescribed it by providers that are not giving them all the other support that they need to have. So yes, I realize that out of pocket, it's not a cheap peptide by any means, but neither is your healthcare when you don't take care of your obesity problem now. Yeah. It's going to turn into something way more expensive down the road. So I think it's you either pay now or pay later. And I think it's an investment because if you get to your ideal body weight, that reduces your risk of all sorts of bad stuff: diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular issues, cancers, mental issues. Like, I mean, the list is so long that we don't have time to talk about it. So it's an investment, but I definitely think that every single one of my patients, with one exception, and she was one that she's the only one that didn't lose weight in my program. And knowing what I know now, it's because she's midlife and she needs her hormones optimized. And I think that was just too much of a factor. But outside of that, like 99% of my patients have had success on semaglutide and or tirzepatide.
And how do you decide on which one?
So I let them choose. I always use the example of Tylenol and Advil, right? So you have the brand name versus the generic name. Brand name is Tylenol, generic name is acetaminophen. Brand name is Advil, generic name is ibuprofen, right? So we have brand name Ozempic and Wegovy, generic name semaglutide or semaglutide, however you pronounce it. And then you have the same over here. You have brand name Mounjaro, brand name Zepbound, and then generic name tirzepatide, right? So then I'd like to describe it. Both are great. You have iPhone 14 and iPhone 15, right? iPhone 14 is amazing, but iPhone 15 does everything iPhone 14 does and then some. So then it becomes just a cost analysis, right? I let them know semaglutide is this price versus tirzepatide is this price. And, I have some patients that I think they have a money tree in the back and they're like, I want the best. Yeah. I'll just do the tirzepatide. And we go straight for the tirzepatide. More times than not, people want to go with the more economical one. And I mean, this has worked in probably 95% of my patients. So when a patient is not having great results on semaglutide, I will offer to switch them to tirzepatide, knowing that it's going to cost a little bit more per month. But those are the only patients that are on tirzepatide. Either they just want the best from the beginning, or semaglutide isn't quite working, and so let's just try tirzepatide. And I've had 0 patients not have success on tirzepatide.
Okay, perfect. You said you like to keep your patients on as low a dose as possible. Talk about a little bit about dosing, if you will.
Yeah. So if we're talking about semaglutide, I'd start everyone at 0.25 unless they tell me that they are super sensitive to medication and there's someone that like, I can only take half of a Benadryl, then I'll actually cut that initial dose in half. So 95% of my patients start at the 2.5 milligrams. I have some patients, I have this one patient that's in Ohio, literally has lost over 75 pounds at that starting dose of 0.25 milligrams. And it's because she was like, look, and she's actually a nurse. And she said, look, I have access to all these doctors that are willing to prescribe it for me. I'm coming to you and paying you money out of my pocket because I want to do it the right way. And she knows the monthly check-ins has kept her accountable to her non-negotiables. And she dove in and went balls to the wall on the non-negotiables from day one. And that's why that low dose has been all that she's needed, right? So dosing, everyone's different. And that's the nice thing. I prefer compounded. And I know that there's the stigma on compounded, but we've never had problems with compounded drugs in the past. Not all compounding pharmacies are created equal. So I would definitely do your research as far as, you know, where the compounding pharmacy is and look online for their credentials. And there's all sorts of different accreditations that you can, you know, double check and make sure that your compounding pharmacy is good. But we've been using compounding pharmacies for decades. So for some providers to say, oh, I don't trust compounding pharmacies, I'm not sure why. I mean, why you would trust these big pharma over compounded pharmacies, I don't know why, but my own personal experience, I've never used the name brand. I've always used the compounded, and it's worked for all my patients. So
very nice. And so you just keep them at the lower dose, and if they are losing weight, you stay on that dose.
So as long as they are doing all of the 5 non-negotiables and losing at least 1 pound of weight per week. So if they tell me, yep, I've lost another 4 pounds, I'm keeping them at that dose. If they've been doing all of the non-negotiables and the weight loss is less than that 1 pound of weight per week, that's when I'll increase the dose. And sometimes I'll, you know, it all depends on the patient and how sensitive they are to the medicine. So sometimes I might go up just by like 0.15 milligrams, and that's just enough to get the ball moving again.
Gotcha. Okay. Back to the non-negotiables. For patients who haven't done these things, haven't eaten the way that they're supposed to eat, that's a big deal. Especially when you talk about, you know, the increasing their protein intake and,
yep.
You know, you've been doing this a while now. Any tricks on just kind of getting patients into doing that and taking those first steps?
Well, first of all, one of the nice things about this class of peptides is that it takes the hedonic pleasure out of eating. So if you are someone who just loves to eat because of the dopamine rush that it gives you, it will actually take that away. It's kind of crazy. Like I when I was on semaglutide, I literally was like, because I've never been a huge drinker, but I would have maybe a cocktail a week. And when I had a cocktail on semaglutide, I was like, I just don't enjoy this. And then it messed with my sleep. And so I literally, while I was on semaglutide for the 7.5, 8 months, I ended up becoming a non-drinker, and I haven't picked it back up. I've maintained my weight loss. I got off of semaglutide in April of 2023, and I've been off of it and maintained it all on my own. So I have not been back on semaglutide. But there's just so many places that we can go with the food part, because if you are someone that loves the, you know, eating out and processed foods, this is a perfect time to break that habit, because it is just a habit. Mm-hmm. And those chemicals from the fake food are literally, they've controlled your brain. So now you have something that can help unbreak that tie. And I always tell patients, I would prefer for your protein to come from meat, eggs, and dairy, right? Those are the best sources of protein. If you don't hit your protein goals, that's when a supplement might be handy. So like good grass-fed whey protein or essential amino acids. I actually just interviewed the CEO of Keon, and I have his aminos, or their aminos, in my water.
Oh, Ben?
Yeah.
Oh,
no, it was Angelo, his Ben Greenfield's partner.
Oh, okay.
So they co-founded it. So
gotcha.
So he's not the face of Ben Greenfield Fitness. He's the co-owner.
Gotcha.
So, but like hearing him the essential amino acids are probably something that I'm going to start using a little bit more with my weight loss patients that struggle hitting that protein goal every day, just to prevent the loss of muscle mass. But alcohol slows down weight loss. Eating crappy food, just less of it. Still, like, use this time to, you're spending so much time and money into investing in this weight loss journey. Why not do it balls to the wall and do it the right way? Because ultimately, most people don't want to be on this their entire life. So if you don't want to be on this your entire life, use it to create these new habits and change what you're eating. Because I mean, you and I both know food is medicine.
Yeah, for sure. Well, very nice. Well, talk about, I guess, a little bit about your podcast, the Made Fit Show. How long have you done that? What are some of the things you talk about on there?
So I have an old podcast that I used to do on my own called the Fitz and Healthy podcast. And when I opened this business, I pushed pause on it because I just didn't have time to do it. But I love podcasting because it gives you an opportunity to meet people that you would otherwise never get to talk to, right?
For sure,
So a dear friend of mine, Melissa McAllister, who has a pretty decent social media following as well, she had her podcast, and it was just getting too taxing. Like she was like, look, I want to keep doing it, but I cannot do it just by myself. And you're the only other person that I could see actually doing this together. So her brand is Made, Melissa Made. And, my brand is Fitz, F-I-T-Z, because my last name is Fitzgerald. So that's the Made Fit show.
Okay.
So she's a certified holistic nutritionist. She's been in the fitness world for 30 plus years. She's a group fitness instructor for a long time. She's been in a ton of workout videos that, are on DVD and streaming, whatnot. So she's always had a real passion of health and fitness, and she's got tons of education and tons of experience. So we kind of put our experience together, and we talk about all things on the Made Fit show. And then my newest endeavor, I used to have a YouTube channel, which I have quite a few videos from when I lived in Oklahoma City, where I taught dance fitness. That was called the Club Fitz Fitness channel. And I grew up to 322,000 subscribers.
Wow.
So I'm changing it because I no longer teach dance fitness. I haven't since 2020. And so I'm changing it to the Dr. Fitz show. And I'm using this as an opportunity to interview other local business owners and talk about all things health and wellness. And so I have a lot going on in the podcast world right now.
Yeah, you sure do. And running a business and everything. Wow.
Yep.
That's a lot.
Juggling a lot, but I love it.
Yeah, that's cool. I want to ask you briefly about biohacking because I know you like all that. So give us maybe one or two of your favorites just for you personally that you just can't live without.
So the biohack of traveling and not getting jet lag was the word I was looking for. Okay. So the biohack for jet lag is you have to wear blue blocking glasses. You have to stay hydrated. So the longest flight that I ever had was 36 hours. So I went from LA to Dubai, had an 8-hour layover in Dubai, and then flew from Dubai to the capital of Maldives. So it was total travel time. And I went with my friend, Melissa, who I do the podcast with. So total travel time was 36 hours. And we literally drank a bottle of water every single hour that we were awake. We wore our blue blocking glasses. We tried to do the sleep wake on their time zone and legit had zero jet lag. We were literally on the other side of the planet and had zero jet lag. So that's one of my favorite hacks. The blue blocking glasses are super cheap. And I mean, so many people have jacked up sleep because they're in front of their computer, TV, or, smartphone right before they go to bed. And that blue light is literally disturbing your quality of sleep, right? Do you track your sleep by any means with
I do.
Oura Ring?
Yeah. I have an Oura Ring. I used to have a Whoop strap. I now use an Oura Ring, and I actually really liked Whoop, and I may go back to that. But yes, I do track my sleep.
The other biohack that I love is it's red light therapy. The red light therapy, it's called photobiomodulation. So photo means light, bio means biology, and modulation means change. So it's the study of how light changes your biology, right? So red light therapy, I originally cared about it because of the whole increased collagen and elastin, because that helps decrease the wrinkles, right? Well, I got into red light and realized it has so many other benefits. If you go to PubMed and just type in photobiomodulation, you'll see like this is not something that's woo-woo. Like there is so much science behind photobiomodulation. So I get in our red light bed. We have a Theralight 360 bed that looks like a tanning bed, but it's a 360 red light bed. It has 4 different wavelengths of infrared light. And I mean, it helps with your sleep. It helps with muscle recovery. It helps with performance. A lot of professional athletic teams have these red light beds because there's so much science behind it. So those are probably my 2 favorite biohacks.
Okay. Yeah. Well, very nice. Well, so I guess kind of on that note, as we wrap up here, my listeners know I always ask my guest if they could give us one health tip that would make us healthier today. What would you say to that? Sometimes it's hard to just pick one.
I know. Man, I mean, if anything, eat like our ancestors did. If it can't be hunted, fished, grown in the ground, or picked from the tree, it's probably not best to be put in your mouth. And while I say that, I drink my processed essential amino acids. I realize, like, the reality of being able to be 100% all natural when it comes to what you put in your mouth, it's hard. But if 95% of it can be food that fits that, if it's not hunted, fished, grown from the ground, or picked from the tree, it shouldn't be in your mouth. I think I think that's the first place that you need to be. I think that needs to be number 1 priority.
I love that. If everybody did that, just that one thing, I feel like it would
change everything.
It would get rid of most chronic illnesses in this
Absolutely.
country.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. I just interviewed Bill Schindler. Do you know who he is? He wrote the book Eat Like a Human. Have you read that book?
Okay. No, I haven't.
Yeah, you need to try to get him on your show. He was fantastic. He's an archaeologist and has traveled the world, and he wrote this book, Eat Like a Human, and kind of researched ancestral eating and everything. Fantastic. So
I will definitely check him out. He sounds like my kind of dude for sure.
Yeah. And I'm actually scheduled to get his wife. So I've interviewed him, and then his wife's coming on the show, and I'm interested to get her perspective, because he just kind of one day like, okay, this is how we're eating, and I'm going to bring this pig home and we're going to slaughter it, and like as a family, and
no way, that's awesome.
and anyway, and they had kids and everything, and and so I'm real anxious to just get her perspective of how they incorporated this into like as a family and the kid, and as a regular way of eating. So
well, so I'm originally from Texas. I mean, I come from a family of hunters. I mean, we have land, and every hunting season, I don't enjoy hunting the way my brother does, but like some of my earliest memories are going turkey hunting and deer hunting with my dad. I remember, hanging the doe up from the old swing set and gutting it. And like, I think that's what our ancestors did. Right. Yeah. There was no it's the circle of life. Like, humans have been eating animals from land and fish from water for hundreds of thousands of years. For anyone that thinks that it's not healthy for us, it's mind boggling to me. Yeah, like agreed. Your packaged vegan crap, really, you think that that's healthier than what humans have been thriving on for? So don't even get me started on that soapbox.
No, agreed. Well, that's awesome. So you see people in multiple states, is that correct?
I do.
Yeah,
if anyone is interested in potentially working with me, they just need to email my staff. It's the email is info@Larimar Med. So that's info@LARIMARMED.com. And my staff will answer if we're a good fit. And I do a ton of content. My Instagram is actually my smallest following. Okay. But that's where I do the most, at Dr. Lauren Fitz. But I do stuff on Facebook, and I do stuff on YouTube as well. But really, my stories on Instagram are really where a lot of the hidden gems are. I love to teach. I love once people realize like what they know and what they didn't know really can change their life. It's empowering, So that's where I'm at most of the time.
Very nice. And your actual clinic is just larimarmed.com. And I'll have that in my show notes. Check that out. So
we have a lot of high quality supplements. The Larimar Med line is actually private labeled by Orthomolecular. And for people that don't know, so the nutraceutical companies, I would never buy a supplement from Amazon or the grocery store, because there's no regulation, right? So you really want to be particular about where you buy your supplements, and you want to buy them from these nutraceutical companies that have third-party testing. So that's why we partnered with Orthomolecular and Quicksilver to do our supplements. So we've got a lot of great supplements, and I use them daily.
Yep. I have either Orthomolecular or I use some Thorn. And those are predominantly the main two that I use. So
yeah, that's also a great brand for sure.
Yeah. Well, very nice. Well, thank you so much. Encourage everybody just to check her out. I'll have all this contact stuff in the show notes. And so good to connect with you again. Really appreciate your time, and appreciate everyone listening. And we will talk to you next time.
Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to FitRx. I invite you to share this with friends and family. If you would like to contact me, you can visit our website at fitrxwellnessok.com, or you can email me at drgreg@fitrxwellnessok.com.